Welcome back to another episode of the Intel with Greg Cosell. I'm Jeff Mosher with Adam Kaplan, and of course, we bring in Greg Cosell so he can break down college prospects preparing for the NFL draft. We are going to do defensive tackles in this episode, which is always a fun one, Greg. There's always these guys come in all shapes, sizes, speeds, measurables. And it's not like you're watching the same type of guy.
No, let me tell you something, Jeff, and you guys may have had the same conversations. I talked to someone at the Combine who said he wouldn't be surprised if 20 defensive tackles went in the first 3 rounds. This is a really, really deep defensive tackle class. And you're 100% right, Jeff. A lot of shapes and sizes, different guys. So now you start getting into team scheme, how they're deployed, and that, again, this is a perfect example, and I know people love it, and it's just not me, of why I don't like making lists. Because it's just, they're different. We can see, hey, I may like some guys more, because of particular traits I like, and someone might like someone more because of particular traits that they like, but you hit the nail on the head. There's so many shapes and sizes here.
And because of that, it's really important when we go through these prospects, and we do this every year anyway, to really discuss scheme fit for them, where they fit best, because not everybody is going to be every team's cup of tea based on some of the measurables and size characteristics alone. So let's start with one school here, Greg, Michigan, which is probably going to have 4 first-round picks, amazingly, because they did not have a very good year. But 2 years ago, of course, they were national champions, and a lot of these guys were responsible for that. So they have 2 defensive tackles. One of them probably going to be a top 5 pick in Mason Graham. What does this tape show on Mason Graham?
Yeah, Mason Graham is a true fun watch because he plays with constant activity and constant energy. He almost looks like a running back at times, the way he plays defensive tackle. It's funny. I don't know what he weighed during the season. I thought at times he looked heavy, and he was always listed in the 318, 320 range, and he got to the Combine, it was 296, because I thought he should lose weight, to be honest with you, and I watched him on tape. And then he apparently did lose weight. He's certainly got the body frame and overall mass. He could be a nose shade, but he's very quick off the ball. And so therefore you start to think about 3 technique, 1 gap penetrator. I think that he has tremendous alignment versatility in multiple fronts. The one part of his game, now he uses his hands really well, and I think he's got strong hands. And, he had some moves, swipes, clubs, swim moves. But as a pure power player, I think that he has to work on that. He's not a pure power player. He's really kind of an energy movement player, even though he has very strong hands. So I'm very curious to see his development. And, again, sacks don't tell you the whole story, but he's not a really good pass rusher right now. Mm-hmm. Now, again, that doesn't mean he can't be a really good player and develop that. But right now, there's not really a power element to his game. And I think that's one reason why he's not really a guy that gets to the quarterback very much.
Staying there at that school, Kenneth Grant is another guy that you look at and you go, he's got a chance to go in the first round.
Yeah, and Kenneth Grant is a guy that I think he lost weight for the Combine. Again, I don't know what guys weighed during the season, but he was 331, I believe, at the Combine. And he's really an interesting guy because he's a very athletic guy for a man that size. He has light, quick feet, and with really good lateral movement. Many might remember, and you will, Jeff, that in 2023 he ran down Katron Allen. I'm sure you remember that play. It's one of those plays that was shown 1,000 times. That play doesn't make him neither a good or bad football player. It just shows that the guy's athletic. But I mean, he's a really interesting guy. I think that, to me, I thought when I finished watching him that, the kind of short area and lateral quickness that he has for that size, you don't normally see from a guy that big. And then there's a power element to his game. I mean, he's not a pass rusher in a strict sense. And my guess is he wouldn't start his career playing in sub defenses anyway. But he drove back interior alignment into the pocket. He worked the edges of interior alignment. You always hear work half a man. That's a phrase that's often used by coaches. Can you work half a man? And he showed the ability to do that with club rip moves that gained leverage. I think there's a lot there with this kid. I think there's more to come. I'm not saying he's going to be an all-pro as a rookie. Who knows? You never know with any of that. He might need a year. Who knows? But I think there's more there with him to continue to be developed.
How do you see him schematically? Can he play like the nose in a 5-2 front, or is he too big to be a 3 technique? I feel like I just can't get a grip on where he's best going to be.
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess, and this is not an exact comparison, and this name just popped into my head, and they're different body types. But I'm wondering if there's similarities in deployment, because that's basically what you're asking about deployment, yes. Correct?
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's similarities in deployment to like a Keanu Benton from the Steelers, who plays nose, but then, has developed to the point where he stays on the field at times in their sub, and he kind of lines up more as like a 3 technique type pass rusher. Grant's not there yet, but I think you could see that down the road.
Right. If I'm not mistaken, Javon Hargrave sort of came out of South Carolina State that way, where he played a little bit of nose, but then eventually became a more of a 3.
Yeah, and of course, you may remember that in college he was a big time pass rusher.
Right.
Right. But you're right. He did not start out his NFL career as a big time pass rusher.
Right.
All right.
Go ahead. We'll move on to Oregon, another school that has 2 pretty good defensive tackles. Derek Harmon, Greg, where does he fit? What jumps out about his tape?
Yeah, Derek Harmon is a little lighter. He's a much more, I think, of a quickness guy. But he still can come off the ball low with leverage and control and displace O linemen. I think that he's, like I said, he's 6'4", 313. He has really long arms. I mean, he looks like an athlete playing the position. That was my sense. I feel that way about Harmon. It'll be interesting with him because, again, you watch him and I feel like there's a lot there. He's a guy that was a rotational player for 3 years at Michigan State because he's from Detroit. He began his college career as Michigan State, and he transferred to Oregon for just this past season. And, I kind of thought that because it's one season that he's a guy that's still developing, but he has athletic traits. He looks like an athlete playing, but I think he needs some more work on the power element to his game. And, I would assume he'll be an ascending type player when he gets to the league, as opposed to a guy that's really ready to play right away. But I could be wrong on that account.
Greg, the next guy we're going to have on our list, I wanted to put a guy from Toledo on there because look, we know that school is on the radar now with Quinyon Mitchell and Darius Alexander. I know he's older. He's going to go in the top 2 rounds. I don't know if he makes it in the first round, but what are your thoughts on him? Yeah,
he's a fun watch, Adam. This kid's got everything. I mean, in many ways, he's as good a D tackle prospect as there is in this draft because he's big, he's physical, he's got athleticism, he's got toughness, he knows how to use his hands pretty well. There's not a lot that he can't do. Now, people, of course, and it's a legit question, the level of competition. And I'm not saying that Quinyon Mitchell helped them because they played different positions, but I think the guy is a really strong prospect. I mean, he's a guy that I knew nothing about other than hearing his name. Just obviously Toledo is not necessarily the game of the week on Saturdays, during the college football season. But he's really, there's not much he's lacking when you watch him play in terms of the traits. And again, you can sit here and say it's the MAC and he's not playing in, Power 5. And there's always merit to that. I mean, because it's the truth. He's not playing against Georgia or Alabama or Michigan or Ohio State or Penn State or Oregon. He's not playing against those schools. So there is merit to that. But, and that's when you have to, do your due diligence with the kid, which, of course, I don't get to do. I'm just sitting in my office at Films watching tape. I mean, I do have some conversations with people. But, again, I'm not sitting down with Darius Alexander. Sure. But it would not surprise me if he's one of those guys that steps right in and becomes a starting D tackle in the league. It would not surprise me at all.
I mean, Jeff, he turns 25 this summer, so that'll be a factor.
Yeah,
hopefully it won't be a big factor because Greg just broke down his tape. From a tape standpoint, he's a top 3 defensive tackle, but you got to get through the competition and the age to see if he goes in the first round.
Yeah, the age thing's always interesting. I mean, we've spoken about that with quarterbacks with Tyler Shuck. You know, most coaches I've spoken to and GMs don't see that as a big deal, you know, but again, everybody's different. You know, everybody's different. Some will, some won't.
But you also have to find out, why is he old? Like, did he transfer? You know, you got to look at the background. Why is he coming out?
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, on a separate note, when you're a head coach at Toledo and you're putting NFL talent into the NFL the way Jason Candle is, you're probably going to be coaching somewhere even bigger and better in the years to come. So
that's a great point, and you're probably right about that. Yeah.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schulter makes sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right, Texas A&M. We talked about Shamar Stewart from A&M as an edge. They have a Shamar Turner at defensive tackle on the inside. What stands out about Shamar Turner's tape?
You know, I like Shamar Turner. I mean, you know, I watched him last summer too when he played a lot more on the outside, and then he played inside this year. I think you're dealing with a guy that has really good quickness, not a lot of power to his game, and maybe that's because he was an outside player, and you know you still need power on the outside, but obviously on the inside, working against guards and centers, the power element is something you really, really need, and that's something he must continue to work on as he transitions to the next level. He's one of those guys, Jeff. You talked about where does a guy go. I don't have a great answer for he should be going to this team, but I think that because he has extensive experience in his final 2 years at Texas A&M, playing both inside and outside, and has had success at both positions, but you're dealing with a guy that's 6'3", 290, although he has long arms. I'd be really curious. You know, we see now in the league, and that's the way you have to think about this, because that's what we're doing. We're projecting and transitioning guys to the league. There's so many multiple front looks now. You know, it's very rare that a team just lines up in static looks with the same guys in the same place all the time. So this guy becomes really interesting because he's had success both playing outside and playing inside. And I happened to speak to his agent at the combine, and I had read this anyway, that he played, I think, with a broken foot or some kind of meaningful injury much of this past season. And, you know, that says a lot about him.
Greg, the next guy that we're going to go to, we've been asked a lot about. That's Walter Nolen from Mississippi. What are your thoughts on him? Yeah. I
could make the argument, and I'm going to right now. Just I could make the argument. I'm going to. I think this guy is the most physically gifted D tackle in the draft. This guy, I mean, he has snaps that were reminiscent of Jalen Carter's tape at Georgia, where he just physically moved and displaced O-linemen with just transcendent confined space, strength, and power. I mean, this guy is a power 3 technique player. And I watched a lot of his tape because, you know, first of all, Ole Miss has about 100 guys on defense that are going to be in this draft. So I kept after watching the tape. And, you know, this guy really stood out to me. You know, just to make one point, because I've mentioned this before, and then I started to get on social media. Well, you know, he doesn't show up. You have to be careful about those comments, because defensive tackles, for the most part, they're not going to be dominant on every play. I mean, you know, that's not the way this works. So, you know, just because a guy doesn't, quote unquote, make a play. And I'll tell you one thing I've learned when I started watching college tape, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe, when I really got a chance to dig in, you know, as part of my annual routine. you could look at a stat sheet and see a defensive tackle have one tackle in the game and then watch the whole game, 75, 80 plays, and he dominates the game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you have to be careful about those kinds of things when you talk about D tackles. But Walter Nolen, to me, I mean, he's a man. And, you know, we'll see. You know, I don't know anything about the kid. You know, there's always reports you hear about players. You know, that changes things. I don't know if there's anything with him about that, but this guy lined up in multiple D tackle positions for Ole Miss. I mean, you're dealing with a guy that showed a desirable combination of off-the-ball quickness. He played low with leverage. As I said, he has transcendent power. I mean, you know, he's a power 3 technique. I mean, I finished watching him and I said that I believe he'll be in this discussion in NFL draft rooms as D tackle 1. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. I don't know that. But when I finished watching his tape and Graham's tape and the other guys, those were my thoughts.
Adam, can you imagine if for whatever reason this guy falls to, because I've seen some, you know, some of the experts in our field that say he could go a little lower in the first round. If the Eagles got Walter Nolen and put him next to Jalen Carter, that would be an unbelievable pair.
God, I know.
Oh my God, who do you double?
Well, you know, it's funny. The Chiefs need a D tackle. You look at, and then Greg's already said this is a very deep D tackle group. But the other thing is, it's what do you want? What are you willing to accept? What as a front office and coaching staff, what do you absolutely have to have? And that will ultimately determine where Walter Nolen goes and these other guys. Because I mean, we literally could talk. We don't have this time, but we could talk. We could go through 30 players and go, wow, we just talked about all these guys are going to get drafted. That's how deep this class is.
And Adam makes a great point because just to give an example, Walter Nolen and Mason Graham are probably both going to be seen as 3 techniques. They're totally different players. You know, so you have to decide, you know, what works for you. What do you like? What do you know? Because Nolen is a power 3. Graham is more of like a movement 3. You know, they're different players. So what works with your defense and your scheme?
Right. I remember we used to compare Gerald McCoy to a Ndamukong Suh, who were both very good DTs, but
same draft, totally different players.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I wanted you, Greg, to go back to what you were saying about being careful evaluating DTs. Also, the number of snaps they play.
Yes,
because you've told the Kawan short story before from Purdue.
Yes.
Where you thought he wasn't very effective.
And that's what I learned from that. I learned from that a great deal.
Right. All right, let's go back to the Big Ten. Ohio State, Talik Williams.
I really like this kid a lot. I mean, I wouldn't call him a pass rusher, at this point in his career, but he's a really good interior player, and he's strong. I mean, he's another guy that there are snaps that are just totally dominant with strength, power. He's got quickness. I think that he's capable of playing in 1-gap systems. He's capable of playing in 2-gap systems. He lines up, as I said, in multiple positions. I think that he can be a 3 technique, even though he probably weighs more than your average 3 technique. But this guy I really like this kid a lot. I mean, to me, there's nothing not to like based on his tape. The only thing you could possibly say, and again, now you get into, does he show up on every play, is that you don't necessarily see the traits as often as you'd like to see them, but they're there. And, again, you might, Jeff, it relates back to your point, just what we said. Maybe if the guy plays 25 or 30 snaps a game or 35 snaps a game, which is likely when a guy starts his career anyway, that you're going to see those traits, pretty much come out on most plays. But I really like this kid. You can just see the strength and power. Some guys, when you watch him, you feel like that guy's a man, that guy's a pro. He looks like that.
It feels like the body type makes it sort of like, because you said he's 330, 335-ish?
334, I believe, yeah.
334, but he's only 6'3". I mean, if he's 6'5", 335, 340.
He doesn't look fat, though, on tape. Some guys look fat.
Right.
You guys see it. You look at a guy and you go, I mean, you know what I'm saying. I don't mean that in a derogatory manner. But this guy doesn't.
Right. Okay.
Wow. All right. One more for you. This one is TJ Sanders from South Carolina.
Now, again, it's funny we're talking about him right after Williams because he's a different player. TJ Sanders is a really, really good athlete. I mean, he's got quickness. He's got acceleration off the ball. He does have strength and power, but I would say that as a pass rusher, and I think that's what he is at this moment in time, he showed an effective array of moves. He's with his hands. He had swipes, rips. He was able to attack and defeat half a man, playing off contact, quick, violent hands. My sense is he'll be an ascending player, and I think he'll probably start off as a pass rusher as opposed to a full-time player, but I think he can develop into one. He's a lighter guy. He's 284. I doubt he's going to play in your base fronts. And again, maybe he'll develop into that, but he's a quickness guy, and you can see that on tape. You just see when a guy just wins with quickness right off the ball and beats an offensive guard, who almost whiffs at times. Sanders is that kind of guy right now.
Greg, last thing, I'm just, if the Eagles, who only have one contract year left as of now of Jordan Davis, are looking for a replacement, but maybe not a first round, like a big body, a 340, 350 guy to play first and second down. Is there anyone among a Cam Jackson or a Dion Wallace or an Alfred Collins, anybody that stands out that would fit that role, that you're just trying to get a situational nose tackle?
I think Alfred Collins fits that role to a certain extent. I mean, Collins, and I'm just, pulling up his info here. Right. But Collins is a big man. He's 6'6", 332 with 34 5/8 arms. In an odd way, he has the same problem at times that Jordan Davis has about, playing a little high. But you're dealing with a guy that has just outstanding size and mass and length, dominant snaps in the run game with his short stroke power where he just struck interior O-linemen and jarred them. Instant force. His really good plays are really, really good. I don't think you'd see him as necessarily a one-gap penetrating type player in even fronts. But if you're asking a guy to play a base defense, D tackle, and odd fronts, such as the 5-man fronts that the Eagles play and that is prevalent in the league, he can be a zero technique and no shade and be a destructive inside force in the run game. Certainly needs development as a pass rusher, but that's not why you're drafting him.
Right. Alfred Collins from Texas there. All right.
Good.
Great stuff. That's going to do it for defensive tackle. What a class. It's going to be really...
There's many more,
Talk more about the others later on.
There's so many in this class. And Jeff, it just comes back to what you said at the beginning. It's a lot of these guys are different, and it's just, what you're looking for in the context of your defense.
Absolutely. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the Intel with Greg Cosell. For Greg Cosell and Adam Kaplan, I'm Jeff Mosher. Catch you on the next one.